There are many ways we might go about documenting our days. Vlogging, taking photos and writing are all good options, but if you're interested in comics or drawing, you might want to try documenting things in this way, but perhaps you don't know where to start, what to include, or you just fear that your skills aren't good enough. If that's you, please do come along on a railway adventure that I then transformed into a small one-page comic, and I hope to offer you some steps and tips on how to make your own. Hello there and welcome to my little art room in the northwest of England. I'm Sam and I'm an artist, and I've been working really hard to be a comic artist over the past year or so. I'm still very much a beginner and I have so much to learn. But today I wanted to share with you a one-page comic that I did after going on a bit of a railway adventure with my friend. Multiple friends, sorry. I think diary comics are a really cool thing to make because it's a really nice way to capture your memories, but also it helps you to practice so many things about comic making without so much pressure on the story because you've kind of just got the story, you've experienced it. And also I think one-page comics are really cool because they're a great challenge of limitation, but also it's just really nice to be able to display a one-page comic as like the one page that has managed to distill, you know, a whole little story or memory down, which I think is a cool element of it. So I hope today I can give you some tips and some steps that I would take to make one of your own. I would hope this is very beginner friendly because I'm going to talk a bit more about this later, but personally I believe even if all you can draw at the moment is the most simplistic things, you can only draw stick figures or whatever, you can still learn so much from making comics like this, and I hope I can prove that to you in the video. But let's get right into it. What might you do to get started trying to make a diary comic or one-page comic? How would you start? So first of all, you want to gather your inspiration and your references. So I would recommend just doing a comic about, first of all, of just one day or one part of a day. Don't overwhelm yourself. And the best way to capture that is, you know, you could take some photos. You could sketch actually while you're on your day. You could take video. So obviously I vlog a lot anyway for this channel, so it's actually quite a nice way to get references for making comics because you have really nice images that you get, and also it actually helps you to remember conversations or like little things you've heard. Also, you can just do this of a day where you were just on your own. I spend many a day like that. So what I would say is try and think of like what little details you want to note down. Is it your breakfast? Is it something you were thinking that day? Even though you're on your own, I think it's very good to try and note down some dialogue, like a thought you had or something you heard or something you were watching on TV or whatever, because I do think dialogue can add another little detail to it. So first of all, gather your inspiration, and as I would say, include some dialogue, because I think dialogue is an extra little bit of life to add to the comic that I do think sometimes is worth adding in. Once you've gathered all these references and you're like, we're now getting to the point of we're going to make the comic, you might have quite a lot of little moments or details you've written down, but you're going to need to reduce that. So think about what are the most important points of the day, what are the bits that you really want to include, and you're going to have to try and be a bit harsh with yourself and cut out anything that feels a bit unnecessary. Like, we've only got one page, we've only got one little comic to make, so what are the most key moments of that day that you really want to include, and that also kind of tell some kind of coherent story of that day. Kind of adjacent to this is we want to next make a very simple plan. Now you might not want to make a plan, you might want to just go for it and be really spontaneous. Part of making a comic like this, I do think, is embracing spontaneity and not overthinking it. However, I'm really bad at visualizing how things fit on a page, so I often do feel the need to have just a very simple plan. So I did an incredibly simple one. I literally just draw the most simple basic visual cue for myself of like, okay, that's a face and they're speaking to me, they're holding something. That was us walking to the train and it's like 3 lines in a box. Like, it's the most simple visual cues possible, but it's just me noting down the points that I really want to cover. And then what I added to that was a very simple script for the comic, and think, how do I want to tie this together in some kind of coherent little story or narrative. I mean, depending on the type of comic you're doing, you might not do that. You might want to go for something a bit more unusual, but I think generally, you know, for people to kind of understand what this comic is about, you might want to write a very, very simple little script. So my simple script was, for my friend's birthday, we went on the steam railway. Our destination was a country park. We'd bought lunch from our favourite sandwich shop. My friends went on the obstacle course. The platform was so empty as we waited to go home. It was like visiting a quiet moment from the past. So you can see how the first bit, I'm literally saying what happened, and then I decided to tie it together at the end with just a little bit more of like literary flair. Like, let's be really generous and call it that. But that was the only time that I really made it more narrative feeling, I guess. The rest of it was just a very simplistic, this is what we did. And then the rest is all dialogue. So I had some extra dialogue of other stuff. And I did also add a little note where I put an exceptionally scruffy dog that we saw, because I did add this little dog in. At the end of each little line, I wrote little numbers for how many panels I was going to aim. Like, okay, that line is going to be for this panel, and then I'm going to move to another panel. So as I went through the script, I was visualising, you know, which moment am I going to pair with this? So again, it's like you're doing the connect the dots and then you're pairing the things together. So which part of the script am I going to pair with which panel? And I'm going to go through like that. Get your paper and simple supplies. So I would say, yeah, keep this simple. I often make work with pencil. So I am quite a simplistic artist, and I will often add maybe a bit of colour, but I often do that digitally these days. So I literally need a pencil and some paper. Now, if you don't have a lot of supplies available, like basic printer paper, a pen, a biro, that will still produce a comic. You don't need fancy materials. I used a 6B pencil and watercolour paper, smooth watercolour paper. I did add a very simple border just to keep things in line, because I'm really, really bad at keeping things in straight lines. So I just added a very simple 2cm border on each side, just to give myself an idea. And then I just vaguely split up the page into 3, because again, I knew from the plan that I was going to have about 6 panels, and so, you know, I split it up accordingly, but it was just a vague guide for me. And then, of course, you can start drawing. Now, I did a mix of looking at my references, like my shots from my vlog, a bit more specifically. Like, I'd gone through and screenshotted different points from the footage that I had. Some of them I looked at more directly, like the train seat moment and when my friends were first approaching the train at the beginning of the comic as well. That was a more direct reference. And at times I referenced, like, my friend Katie, who was kind of the main character of the comic, it was her birthday. Like, I referenced her more specifically, actually looking at photos. However, for other bits, I was really thinking about memories. Like, I didn't have a photo of the scruffy dog, I just drew that as a little character from memory. I drew myself reacting to them on the obstacle course, when obviously I didn't have a shot of that, I didn't have a shot of my own face. There was a point actually where I took a video of myself on the train platform, but I've been quite ill recently with vertigo and stuff, so I was a bit out of it, and I didn't actually press record when I took the video, so I didn't actually have any footage of myself in this vlog. So that was a moment where I like added myself into the narrative to kind of create that reactionary vibe to it, like I was reacting, and I thought that was fun. So what I would say is, whether you're going to use your references quite heavily or whether you're going to just purely remember things, I would say don't get too fixated on direct references or it looking perfectly like it did or anything like that. This is about trying to capture a feel of the day. That is important, and so if it's not absolutely perfect, don't worry. I think I just wanted some references because I wanted to be able, for example, for the train to kind of at least look a bit like a train, and I have to admit, in my own brain, I can't quite picture a train well enough to just remember that and draw it as it would have been. What do I put here? Yes, don't be harsh on your drawing. Yeah, important. So at this point, you've basically done it. You're doing it. Are there any finishing touches? So do you want to add colour? So what I decided to do was, so like basically I've had some issues with my vision because of the illness, like the ill health I've had. So I couldn't really look at my iPad. My iPad was one of the hardest things to look at. So I didn't want to do full colour. So I thought it'd be nice to just add a splash of colour. And this was a good example where actually consulting someone else can result in a helpful thing, because I originally used like an orange, because with a lot of my work I draw from a similar colour palette, but my friend sort of said that she didn't think it was quite the right colour. This was the friend who's in the comic, by the way. And she said it'd be nice if it was more like a deep red, like the red of the railway we were on, like the logos and stuff, and the seats of the railway, the seats of the train. And so I ended up trying that, and I actually layered it over the orange, and it became this really nice warm red. Now at first I was worried red was going to be a bit too like overwhelming for it, but actually it kind of worked. And it also helped that she kind of said to me, like in the last panel, to take away, I'd added red like over the top of the seats as well, and she said I think you should take that off and just have the seats red. And it actually helped really balance it out. So it was a really great example of like, don't be afraid to ask someone else for their input, because it can really help to produce something that you're happier with, because sometimes you do just get really lost in your own creative process and you can't see the wood for the trees, and then someone else might point it out and you go, actually yeah, that's exactly what it needed. So that was what I did. So that was the comic done. Look. That's cute, but I will not eat it.
No, I want you to.
I'm just saying.
Oh, you've been very challenging. I love the sound of a wood pigeon.
As do I.
It reminds me of home, like being in the back garden.
It's summer as well, don't you think?
Yeah.
But wait! The most important thing to do now, the final step, in my opinion, is ask yourself what you've learned. Because some people may be looking at their comic thinking, Sam, this is far away from what you've done. Or probably there's people out there who've done it way more beautifully than me, but I'm saying there'll be people who are going like, all I can do is some stick figures and it looks really bland, and I don't feel like this is anywhere near what you've done, right? But the point is that you can learn so much from doing this, and there's so much about comics that is more than just the drawing. Like obviously it takes a heck of a lot of drawing, but drawing skill is not the only thing that comics need. There is so much. So for example, just things that I could think of. What have you learned from doing this? What can you take from this? And what I believe also, the more that you might do something like this, the more you might make one-page comics or diary comics, the more you could learn these things and improve these skills over and over. You have practiced distilling events into one single page. So you've practiced how to take, you know, a lot of material, a lot of different moments, and potentially you could have had a pretty hectic day that you've tried to put into that one page, and you have practiced how to distill that down into something understandable that is literally just one page, that is understandable through just a few panels. And that is a really, really good thing to be able to do to make comics, because comics are, you know, they're told in so many different paces. You know, some people will tell the same moment with 10 panels that somebody else would tell with one. But how you navigate that is something that will be, you know, what is your thing? That's how you've got to decide. Yeah, how you navigate that will be personal to you. You might be somebody who really likes to draw every little moment, or you might be somebody who likes more fast-paced, even abstract comics. But this kind of activity can really help you to see what are the moments you really love to show, what are the things that you really pick up on in a day that are important. I could look at mine and say, for example, I think for me, something I loved capturing was kind of the humour of the day and things my friends said. Now on this day, we also, we saw trains, quite a few times. I could have drawn more trains, I could have focused more on the train itself, or, I don't know, the view out the window and things like that. And even though I wanted to take a moment to show that, because, in the last panel, for example, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about, the quietness of it and kind of the history of it, a lot of the comic is very much about actually my friends and kind of the funny things they said and the kind of dynamic between us. So clearly that was what I kind of honed in on, and it kind of makes sense because I'm a very character driven person. And this is something, again, over time you can learn so much about yourself and what you're naturally drawn to without having to necessarily logically know these things about yourself just from self-exploration. You might find that you can see it right there on the page and you can learn things without even having to know them logically in your brain. I don't know how to explain what I'm saying, but yeah. So yeah, you've practiced making a coherent mini story out of simple moments, out of mundane moments, out of your everyday, and I think that's a really cool thing. You've also practiced balancing things visually. For example, contrast, busyness versus sparseness. Because as you make these comics, you may find that you're going, well, do you know what? Some of these panels feel really, really intense, and then I've got some really empty ones down the bottom here, and it doesn't really look balanced, it doesn't look right. For example, how my friend pointed out the colour felt a bit unbalanced. And then when we tweaked it, it ended up looking more, more good. Forgive me, I'm still a bit under the weather. You've practiced drawing different environments. When you make diary comics or anything about your life, you're naturally gonna draw different things. You might draw different rooms in your house, you might draw your car, you might draw the bakery you went to that day. You're naturally going to draw these things without necessarily having to go, what am I going to draw today? Or worrying about, can I draw a city? I don't know if I can draw a city. You might end up just naturally going for it because the day called for it, because that's what you did in that day. So I think that's a good practice as well. And then another one I thought of was, you've practiced communicating things less directly. So for example, when we're in the country park, you don't actually see any nature, you don't see any trees, you don't see any grass. There's a little bit of grass around the dog actually, but not obviously. But you can still feel that that's where we are, I hope, because my friend talks about finding a berry. We're thinking we're in somewhere that's in nature. And also we're eating a picnic. And then the obstacle course, again, it must be outside. It's got these visual cues of the outside without necessarily having to be a tree with the sun in the background, with grass, I think what I'm saying is it's a good practice of you don't always have to directly draw exactly every detail of where you are. But if you can give, clues and signs of where it is. For example, the various clues in mine that we were outside, berries, sunglasses, having a picnic, being on an obstacle course. I don't necessarily have to draw a big country park with the trees and all that kind of thing, because you kind of get that from what we're doing. And I do say it in the script as well, but I'm just saying even without the script, it has that visual dynamic. So I think it's really important. I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I truly think it's so, so important to ask ourselves, what have we learnt from something? Rather than getting down about it, rather than thinking, oh, I don't know what I think about that. Think about how much there is about that isn't just what it looks like. I think we get so lost. Obviously art is so visual, but it's not just about what it looks like, it's about, you know, what have I learned? How have I distilled something there? How have I told a little story there? I think there's always value to things. There's always something to learn. So yeah, I hope that could be helpful to you. I hope it might encourage you to give making little comics a go, even if you are a complete beginner and you don't even feel like you can draw much yet. I do feel that comics are such a wonderful way to enjoy drawing and to capture things in drawing, in drawings. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. Thank you for listening, and I do apologise if the talking section of this was a bit not quite as coherent as I would normally be. I've been quite unwell for like 2 months. I had vertigo and I've got a really severe vitamin D deficiency. I don't want to speak too soon, but the past couple of days I do seem to be slightly heading towards the more positive, and the fact that I've actually managed to do this video maybe is a good sign, because I've probably attempted this 2 or 3 times now, but I've actually managed to get through it today. So yeah, thank you for your patience with my channel, and if you're here for the first time, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, just do be aware, I have been a bit under the weather. This is actually the only piece of art I've managed to make in the past 2 months, and it was quite hard to get through, but I really like it for how it captured the memories and how it captured my friends. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope it might encourage you to draw something and to inspire you. I have been asked before, like, if I would do something that's a bit more tutorial based, so this was my attempt to kind of slightly do that, but I'm not quite well enough to like really do a proper tutorial, so I don't know, this was to sort of try it out, sort of just go for it, you know, test the waters sort of thing. I appreciate it's not necessarily like a really helpful tutorial, but it's more like tips and steps, I don't know. But just another note that I have reopened my shop. I wanted to open it when I had new stuff in it, but honestly I've ended up being a lot more ill than I expected, with the deficiency particularly, and my vision has been really weird. So I think it's going to be a long time before I actually have new stuff to put on it, and all that time I'm like, I don't want to keep my shop shut all that time and block off the opportunity for people to buy things in the meantime, because there is like a fair amount of stuff on there still. So yeah, I don't want to block off that opportunity. Yeah, I'm going to reopen that. And I am currently only shipping really to the UK and select countries like Australia, for example. I mentioned that just because I do get a few orders from Australia. Hopefully when they settle the American customs rate, I can put that back on. The EU situation is really complicated though, so I don't know what I'm going to do about that until we get any clearer guidance, which there hasn't been for like the past year or so. I don't know what to do about that. My business is just too small to navigate it at the moment. So yeah. Yeah, shop's gonna reopen. I have a massive long list of videos that I want to make. I have a backlog of footage, but I just wanted to get this one done first because I thought it was a nice thing to share, to show the railway journey and to suggest maybe how to capture things in comics. I hope it's worked. Okay. Thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate you all so much. Thank you so much for your kind words when I've been unwell, and thank you for your support and for coming back and watching time and time again. My dad told me that I have to ask, please subscribe if you haven't. It really helps me out, genuinely helps support me. And yeah, like the videos, comment. I do read all the comments, I reply, so I really value them. Thank you. And hope to see you next time.